Khumesh Tokas is a chartered accountant qualified in November 2006, having more than 15 years of enriching post-qualification experience in audits, taxation and financial advisory. He has worked for 10 years with EY and Deloitte and joined a startup, OFB Tech Pvt Ltd, which has turned unicorn in 2021 as financial controller before being associated with Bhatia and Bhatia as audit partner. His current profile includes providing consultancy in relation to audits, statutory compliances, GST and tax litigation. He is also actively working with startups for their restructuring and funding requirements. To start with, my first question to Mr. Tokas is, what do we exactly mean when we say listing of Indian companies overseas?
So when we talk about the overseas listing of the Indian companies, it's similar to how the companies are listed in the Indian stock market. The only difference is when we are talking about direct listing, which means the companies which are not listed in the Indian stock market can be listed there. So this is a new mandate which has come up in the Lok Sabha in the month of October 2020, and there are rules and regulations which are being framed as we talk about these things. So like the Infosys, which is the first Indian company which got listed in the Nasdaq in March 1999. So they followed the route of ADR and GDR, like American Depository Receipts or Global Depository Receipts. But now with the new regulations coming in, these things can be put away with and the direct listing can be done in the overseas market.
All right, great. And so what are the key drivers and challenges for Indian companies?
There are many things which needs to be taken care of when the company goes for overseas listing. Because key drivers could be many, because like the Indian market, it is still gearing up for those levels where they could hit a $1 trillion economy, whereas the more stable markets like US, UK, China, Germany, they have already achieved those feats. So like if we talk about more of additional source of capital or the financial stability, so it would be of course a driving factor for the Indian companies to list overseas, because then they could cater to the more needs of the people. And then with companies like Japan and Germany, where they offer capital at very low rate of interest, so it also attracts the higher and accurate valuations. Then there are different market stabilities which gives them better valuation in terms of their benchmark, which they can do their industry specific criteria. Like any company, like if we see Reliance, though it's doing very good in the Indian market, will it be able to perform at the same level in the global market? So for those, the studies of peer benchmarking needs to be done, but it gives the better valuation for all the new companies and the old companies to investigate and diversify their investor base. So these factors surely benefit the companies which are looking for the overseas listing. But of course, with all the benefits comes their hindrances also. There could be hindrances like there would be many regulatory constraints. And if we are talking about regulatory constraints, then of course a company needs to cater to the both gaps, like they would be reporting in the India also and they would be reporting in the foreign country also. Like if somebody have an investor in US, so they would be creating their financials in Indian GAAP, then US GAAP, and if the parent entity of US is in Singapore, so they might adhere to the Singapore accounting structure also. So the cost of regulatory compliance, and then of course the litigations, because every country have their own set of rules and regulations, are something which needs to be looked upon. And of course from the cost and tax benefits, there are some hindrances, but with the benefits which the diversified market offers, they are fewer.
All right. Like to understand more about the overseas listing of Indian companies, there are like a lot of questions and there are a lot of queries as well. What shall be the qualification criteria for Indian companies to get listed abroad?
Right. So see, like before you prepare yourself for the listing, of course you need to set up your base within India. You need to have your past 3 year financials, your compliances in terms of the host country, like you are not doing any uh, tax evasion, or you are properly filing your returns, you are getting your accounts audited. So all those things needs to be prepared. And then when you are going for a overseas listing, so you cannot just go and pick up any country of your choice. So there are being rules which has been laid down by the government. And like the act which they have amended, like clause 23 subsection 3 in the Companies Act, they have specifically mentioned that jurisdiction or permitted stock exchange of the foreign jurisdiction, as may be prescribed, can only be looked into. And when you say like permissible foreign jurisdiction, they have again laid down a mandate that that particular stock exchange should be a member of board of International Organization of Securities Committees. Then they should be a member of Financial Action Task Force, and they should not be identified in the public statement of the FATV. And then they should be having jurisdiction of the Anti-Money Laundering Act, because like if you are listing your company in foreign entities, so anti-money laundering is something which needs to be taken care of. And basis this criteria, they have identified some 7-8 countries, or I would say the stock exchange, on which you can prepare yourself to list. And these being of course, the famous one, United States of America with NASDAQ, London Stock Exchange in UK, then Shanghai Stock Exchange in China, Tokyo Stock Exchange in Japan. Then we have Korean Exchange in South Korea, Frankfurt Stock Exchange in Germany, and Toronto Stock Exchange in Canada. So they have also identified a list of stock exchange where people can prepare themselves and go for the direct listing.
All right. But in cases where unlisted Indian companies directly list their securities on international stock exchange, will SEBI regulations apply to them? And in addition to the regulation of the overseas capital market regulator?
Yes. So now comes a tricky question, because see, when you are investing in all those countries, that's why they have added that permissible jurisdiction. So you need to follow the both SEBI requirements and the overseas requirements. And this is basically to avoid any of the anti-money laundering activities which could take place. So SEBI would be governing your actions, yes, because your principal place of business would be in India and you have a parent company in India. So you would be required to adhere all the requirements of the SEBI. Yes, in case of foreign exchange, so what you would be following in those particular countries. So as of now, what the law stands today, they are silent on this particular issue. So the work, of course, is still in progress, and once the Indian government comes up with a robust rules or law where they will in the mandate state down all the possible conditions and everything, of course then there would be much more action from the foreign country side also, because as of now all the FDIs rules are being followed, and the investment by foreigners in any equity of such entity would be considered as an FDI.
How will the transfer of the said shares to be taxed in India?
Yeah, no, good. So that's a very good question, because there would be many tax rules and regulations which will revolve around the same. So see, as of now, any transfer of overseas listed equity shares attracts capital gain tax. And that income tax law treats all such shares as capital assets in India. But when we go for the framework of foreign listing, then it needs to be tax efficient, because like in case of ADR or GDR, if any non-resident deals in those kind of shares, so there are some relaxations on the capital gain. But when the same condition would be laid down on persons in Indian origin and they are dealing with such shares, so we need to keep them at the balance equation. So those relaxations should be there, and they should not attract the capital gain tax. So such cases should be exempted from the capital gains. But then the levy of all those capital gains on transfers of Indian companies between two foreigners will make them unattractive as compared to the investment done by the foreign listed company on the same platform. So those types of conditions should be noted down, and of course a rule should be framed when the government comes up with the mandate how the taxation would be done.
All right, all right. And like sir, foreign stock exchange will allow listing of Indian companies. Which all foreign stock exchange?
Right. So see, like when we are talking about that permissible jurisdiction and all the 7-8 stock exchanges which the Indian government have identified. So these are the stock exchanges which are globally regulated, and there are many other players from other countries who are investing heavily in these foreign exchange. And these stock exchanges, like over a period of time, have gone through all the possible audits or the rules regulations which needs to be followed at the global market. All the anti-money laundering activities have been done away with. They are members of the ISOC, FATF. So I think all those exchange would surely allow when the Indian companies come up with their overseas listing. But as of now, since I shared earlier also, the law is silent from their side because Indian government have just passed the mandate. They have passed in Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha during this 2020 only. So they are still in the process of preparing those preamble, I would say, for the overseas listing. And of course, the rules will get modified going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Tokas, for your time. I really appreciate it. And in case our viewers had any query regarding overseas listing in Indian companies, kindly drop a comment. Thank you so much.